Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Well, he's done a lot in his career. We've often talked about his Hollywood experience, and we'll talk about that in a minute. He's a terrific journalist and presenter and producer of the terrific What Really Happened show. Go to whatreallyhappened.com, Michael's website, where you'll find out more about him. Terrific to have him on. Terrific to get his take on what's happening in his country, particularly with the election of Donald Trump. He's only been in office a few weeks. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about a few things in a half an hour. We've got Mike on the line. Let's welcome him back. Mike, welcome back. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you for having me again.
I always love an opportunity to mention your Hollywood experience. I always love an opportunity. Michael was involved in the greatest B movie ever made, Alligator, which is absolutely brilliant. And it still looks great today, my friend. I love that. And you know LiveLeak.com is one of the biggest websites in the world. The guy who runs that, I make television programs with him. His name is Hayden Hewitt. And Hayden is the biggest movie fan. He's a bigger fan than Tarantino. And he also loves Alligator. So there you go.
Well, you know what's kind of interesting about Alligator? It's one of two movies in which I had two different roles in, because I worked on the actual building of the Alligator at Apogee, and then I was let go from that, and then I was called by my acting agent to play a doctor. And I just showed up, and there was my alligator on the trailer, and I'm seen briefly at the very, very end of the movie.
That's right. That's right. It's terrific. If you can get a copy of it, folks, do watch it. It's a fabulous movie. Very funny.
Don't waste your money.
No, it's good. You know, Michael, considering the time it was made,
yes.
the effects do not look crap. They do not. It's good and it's funny, and there's some great lines in it, and I loved it. Now, this made me laugh today, Mike. The Oscars, right? Emma Stone says, there's no way, she says, they could have had a card with my name on it for Best Actress, because I had it in my hand. Somebody from PricewaterhouseCoopers said, well, we have several envelopes all saying the same thing, belt and suspenders, and all of that. That's what we do. Other people are saying that because of what's going on in your country at the moment, because of allegations of racism, that there was a late decision to hand the best film award to Moonlight. Now, that's stretching it a bit far, conspiracy theory-wise. Or is it, Mike?
It's definitely stretching it a bit far, with all due respect to Emma Stone. The way the Academy Awards are set up is there's a briefcase with all the envelopes on both ends of the stage with exactly the same envelopes, and the idea is that whoever is closer to that side of the stage, they get their envelope from that person. And so there are, in fact, duplicates of the Best Actress Award, and it does look like it was an honest mistake. Certainly the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences is not going to go along with something that is that humiliating to them. And in the process of deciding who's going to win the awards, there are ample opportunities for political input, and a lot of people outside Hollywood don't realize that there's what is called the Blue Ribbon Committee, and they actually steer the nominations. You can win a nomination and you can have it taken away from you by the Blue Ribbon Committee so that they can steer things in a certain direction. And we know there's a lot of politics in the Academy Awards. One example I like to point to, of course, is the year Avatar came out, which is this fabulous movie. It's still my all-time favorite movie. Anti-imperialist, anti-military, anti-corporate. And certainly because that was not the political agenda at the time, they got snubbed by the Academy Awards, even though they got awards all around the rest of the world. And the Oscar for Best Picture went to The Hurt Locker, which is this pro-war piece of propaganda. And I didn't even think it was that great of a movie. But there is a lot of politics, and they wouldn't need to make the decision at the very last second while the broadcast is going on. So this was an honest goof. And the only good news about it is that this last Academy Awards had the second lowest viewership in all of Academy Award history, so most Americans didn't notice.
Didn't even watch it, yeah. Good stuff, Mike. Finally, just to leave the Academy Awards just with this, just before you came on, the journalist Marwa Osman from Beirut was on talking about, amongst other things, we talked about a lot, about the White Helmets winning the documentary. Now, Michael, if ever a political decision was made, and I'd love to know Was there any pressure put on the Academy, the men and women whom you described who make these nominations? What sort of pressure externally was put on these people to award this documentary, which is absolute fabrication, Michael? You and I both know this. We know who the White Helmets are. What was going on? What was going on there?
Well, there's all kinds of avenues for pressure, financial pressure from sponsors. We know that the CIA still runs Operation Mockingbird to have assets at the top of all these studios and structures. We know the FBI floods the Hollywood industry with lots of informants. They're a major pain in the neck. And so, obviously, a lot of people went over there and said, you got to give the short documentary to this blatant piece of pro-war propaganda. And, it's not the first time Hollywood has served the war propaganda agenda throughout the years. And, it's kind of an interesting little story. J. Edgar Hoover, even before he was head of the FBI, his opinion was that Hollywood filmmakers should always be serving the government's propaganda needs. And, of course, this led to his ongoing argument with Charlie Chaplin. Chaplin knew that his audiences spent money to buy tickets to see movies where people in government were portrayed as oafish buffoons. And that was where he was making his money. And Hoover absolutely hated Charlie Chaplin's movies and eventually was instrumental in helping to get Chaplin's residency revoked and kick him out of the country back to Great Britain. In fact, when Chaplin came back to the Academy for his Lifetime Achievement Award, it took a special act of Congress to get him into the country because of that immigration ban. So there's a lot of politics. If you're my age, you probably remember a movie called The FBI Story starring Jimmy Stewart.
Yes.
And the interesting one about that is J. Edgar Hoover was actually on that soundstage every single day telling the director how to direct the movie to craft the most positive possible image for the FBI. And Hoover actually appears in it briefly in a cameo shown only from the back. So, yeah, FBI obsession with Hollywood and controlling it has been legendary in the industry.
Brilliant stuff, Mike. Great to mention Chaplin there and all of that. 17 minutes past the hour. Michael Rivero, check out whatreallyhappened.com. Many of our listeners will be listening to Mike. If you haven't listened to him before, check him out. Terrific stuff. Now, since you and I last spoke, a couple of things have happened. The Israeli Prime Minister visited even the United States, but since then, let's say it's been called the war, the media war between Donald Trump and his press department against basically the organisation CNN and the BBC and others. Now, you and I, Mike, much of what we attempt to do, and we get it right, I think, a lot of the time, maybe sometimes we don't, but what we try to do is present an alternative to the spin and to the lies that are presented on mainstream media. However, I have a huge problem, and I've been talking about this a lot lately even, with any leader of any government, no matter where he or she comes from, deciding and dictating to the country what is fake news and what isn't. I believe it's incredibly dangerous, and I've made the point repeatedly in recent weeks that surely those people who find it a great thing and who support what Trump is doing, surely they don't think that if the CNNs and the New York Times and these organisations, if they're eventually frozen out, that we will be left unmolested to continue to do what we are doing. I know you know what we're getting at. What do you think of what's been going on?
Well, Donald Trump, if the corporate media had been honest and fair and truthful through the years, Donald Trump's ranting and raving would be easy to dismiss. But the corporate media has its own track record working against it. And certainly during this last year, I think everybody finally got the message that the corporate media is no longer firmly in control of the minds of America. Trump's election showed that. And Trump knows that he had to overcome a tremendous amount of media bias, constant attacks from the corporate media. Meanwhile, the corporate media was openly admitting they were giving Hillary Clinton a free pass on everything. They were protecting her. They even admitted it on air. There's a video of it on the front page of What Really Happened. I think we put it up there just yesterday. So Trump knows that the corporate media was adversarial against him, just as the corporate media has been adversarial against the independent media for decades now. But up until recently, the independent media was still being treated like, oh, these nutcases out on the fringe, nobody's paying attention to them. And all of a sudden, corporate media is losing readership. They're losing viewership. They've actually been caught hiring companies to fake Twitter followers, to fake clicks onto their online presence, to try and manufacture that they still have a major readership, and they absolutely don't. And they're in a complete panic. Now, the deep state establishment relies on the corporate media to convince the American people to do what they're told. And the independent media, of course, is saying, think for yourself. And now, all of a sudden, we have a president who's gone into office recognizing that it was the independent media that he owes a great debt to in terms of winning this last election. And he knows the corporate media has been openly hostile. They continue to be openly hostile. And Trump did not start this war. It was started for him by this corporate media that is still on out there trying to insist they're the real news and everybody else is, lying and in cahoots against them. I mean, Washington Post included me on their list of websites that were arms of Russian propaganda. And then, of course, 24 hours later, they had to back off that story. And at this point, they're just throwing out more and more ridiculous things all the time. And they're losing their grip on the minds of America, and they're in absolute panic mode. And so now you have people like Nancy Pelosi and George W. Bush coming on out and saying, well, the free press is essential to democracy. But what they mean by the free press is the corporate media that's under their control. And what they mean by democracy is maintaining the illusion of democracy as the nation continues to sink into a fascist economic dictatorship.
Where was where was that media when Bush was telling lies about weapons of mass destruction and that? I agree with that. But there's a huge but here now. Well, you and I both know that media which we speak of is largely owned by a half a dozen major corporations and financial institutions. We know this. However, one of the reasons I've always loved listening to you over the years is you know and I know these issues are not black and white. Within the mainstream media, there are still terrific, there aren't many of them, Michael, but there are still very good journalists asking questions and trying to uncover things. I know this to be true because without them, we wouldn't know about certain aspects of child abuse. We wouldn't know about the criminalisation of poverty over here, the benefit sanctions on people who need state assistance here. I could go on and go on and go on. I believe what we're seeing here now, with what's going on in DC with Trump and with what Max Mosley is trying to do with the British government here now, is an all-out war on the press in general. And what we're going to see, because I can't argue with what you said about the behaviour of CNN and these institutions, but as you said, Mike, these institutions are losing their readership, they're losing their viewing figures anyway, because it's up to us as individuals, as private citizens. It can never be allowed that a president, a prime minister, a secretary of state can dictate to journalists representing CNN or the BBC that they can't attend a briefing, they can't be there, they can't ask a question. This is terrifying stuff, Mike. This is, you talk about fascism.
I disagree there.
The essence of fascism.
First of all, you understand that access to the White House has always been selective. Every single president makes a list of who is and is not allowed to come into that press room because it's a small press room. And you will generally find the small independent papers have always been left out. Certainly the independent media has been left out until this administration. But it is up to the president to decide who he's going to talk to and who he's not going to talk to. And if you have these corporate media outlets with a track record of distorting and warping what he's saying, he's going to prefer to communicate directly to the American people through Twitter, through Facebook. And right now, polls are showing
where he can lie, Michael, where he can lie without being challenged. He can lie pathologically without being challenged.
Hang on a second. Right now, polls are showing that the American people trust Donald Trump's direct communications much more than anything regurgitated to them from the corporate media.
That's a tragedy, though, isn't it? That's a tragedy.
If Donald Trump lies, okay, the independent media will certainly step in, because certainly my experience over the last 24 years, where the Republicans think I'm a Democratic shill and the Democrats think I'm a Republican shill, I go after both parties with equal vigor, and if I catch Trump in a lie, I'll certainly make it headline news. What's the real issue here is control, and those corporate media outlets, as you say, are supported by their corporate masters quite well. But on the day those corporate masters realize the corporate media has lost control of the minds of America, they're going to put their checkbooks away.
Yeah.
And these people are going to have to find real jobs, which is very tough in this economy.
No, I can't argue with that. But my point is, what we're seeing this attack on mainstream media. We're seeing a president screaming at people, calling them fake news, calling them liars. The American people, or at least those who support Trump, are lapping it up, but they're missing the massive point. And I mean, I'm terrified at the thoughts that American citizens would say, private citizens would say, oh, we trust what we get directly from the Twitter feed of Donald Trump. But Trump has proven, from statements he made during his campaign to statements he's made today, he's proven to be a pathological liar anyway. And what Trump is doing...
I would disagree
well,
with that.
Well, just before I shut up...
In any event, regardless of whether Trump is speaking the truth or a lie, isn't it better if we get it directly from him instead of having another 3 or 4 layers of liars sitting on top of it, only making the situation more obscure?
Michael, you are a brilliant journalist, mate. I would love that if you got to sit down with him. But nobody is getting to sit down. He went on Fox and Friends this morning. Jesus Christ, Mike. I've never seen anything like it. On the one hand, I'm calling you a journalist, which you are, of integrity. And on the other hand, I'm looking at these 3 Muppets sitting on a sofa, grinning at him. I mean, Michael, it's disgusting. There's not a single question in a 25-minute segment. Not a single question. Listen, by all means, Mr. Trump, go on Twitter and say, listen, this is what I want to say, and I want to say it in a way that it can't be misquoted later. But he has to be challenged, Michael. Who's going to challenge him? Alex Jones?
Okay, Richie.
Go ahead.
Okay, you started a discussion about the nature of the media, and it seems like we're sort of mutating into your venting about how much you dislike Donald Trump. And I'd kind of like to get back on point, which is that the corporate media has destroyed its own credibility. Trump didn't do anything. I mean, even before Trump announced that he was running for the presidency, the corporate media was in serious trouble because we in the independent media had pointed out Saddam didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Assad wasn't gassing his own people with sarin gas. There were no torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. The Lusitania was smuggling weapons to Great Britain when she was sunk. There was no Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, and on and on and on and on and on. The corporate media has destroyed their own credibility, and Trump has really very little to do with it. All we have in President Trump is a president who is not sympathetic to protecting and preserving the corporate media as the corporate media tries to regain audience share from the independent media.
Can I agree with you? You're absolutely right in saying that Trump has nothing to do with it. But I do take issue with the mischaracterization of me disliking Donald Trump. I despise them all equally because none of them ever, with the exception of Kennedy, has ever done anything for their fellow citizens. They've all served the cabal one way or another. I don't despise him. In fact, I would go as far as to say that if somebody put a gun to my head and said, you've got no choice, Richie, even though I don't vote and I don't believe in it, Mike, I would take him over Hillary Clinton because Clinton and her husband are amongst the most disgusting criminals that your country's ever...
Agree.
We definitely agree on that.
And my work over the last campaign season was more about breaking the Clinton-Bush duocracy away from our government than it was actually supporting Trump. If there had been somebody else out there, like had Bernie Sanders won the nomination, I probably would have supported him. If a wise Tulsi Gabbard runs in 2020, based on Trump's disappointments to date, I might switch over and support her if she were to run for the presidency.
Brilliant. Mike, listen, the last thing I'll say on this particular issue, because I want to talk about something else, and I'm mindful of the fact as well that you've got deadlines as well. The last thing I'll say on this is, my big fear, Mike, is that the cabal that owns the media, now I know this sounds like, deep conspiracy stuff, but it isn't. They've never been able to fully control their own entity, Michael. They've never been able to control their own organisations because things come out all the time. As bad as the media is, there are always beacons of light within it. And I think what we're seeing, I'm not blaming Trump for this, I'm blaming the people around him, the people who massage his ego and others. What we're seeing is, I believe, a full-scale attack on the media in totality. And if those people in the independent media who support Trump's attacking the CNNs of this world because they feel this is great, it's justice, finally these people are getting called out, they're missing a point. Because what we need to be doing is, and David Icke said this to me a week or so ago, we need those decent journalists asking questions, and there are still a few of them out there. need to work with the rest of us, right?
There are a lot of rank and file journalists who are trying to do a good job. I often mention the story of Sally Denton and Roger Morris. I'm sorry, I'm confusing two stories. There were these two Fox reporters who were assigned to write a puff piece on Monsanto synthetic bovine growth hormone. Their actual research showed there were serious health problems involved in consuming those products. They took the story back to Fox. Fox ordered them to change it to take out all the negatives. The reporters refused, and they were fired. They sued Fox News, and they lost on appeal. When the judge ruled there is no law requiring the corporate media to be truthful with the American public. Therefore, corporate media management, most of whom are part of the CIA's Operation Mockingbird, can order their journalists to lie to the public. And if the journalists refuse to lie to the public, they can be fired for cause. There was a huge embarrassment just on MSNBC when Mika Brzezinski admitted on air that the job of the corporate media is to control what people are thinking. And as long as they're able to appear to be doing that, they're going to be getting these really fat paychecks to be on the camera. And on the day when that grip slips, their financial backers are going to put away the checkbooks, and they're going to have to find regular jobs.
Just this is cheeky now, Mike, but you've walked me into this. Trump would tell you that Fox News are okay. Fox is not fake news. You see, this is the problem I have. And I don't want to go over that old ground again because I totally respect your opinion.
I don't want to either, but there's a point that you are missing, and that is starting on the campaign trail last year, it was the corporate media that started this war against Donald Trump. And once the election was over, the attitude we were getting out of BBC, CNN, and so forth was, okay, we're going to let bygones be bygones, and we get to be the head of the line at the White House press corps, and Trump said, no, you don't. And that's what this is all about. And so the corporate media realizes their reputation and their credibility, their brand has been seriously, seriously damaged, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to be able to convince the American people to come back into the warm embrace of corporate media and just blindly believe everything that they're told. Saddam has nuclear weapons. Assad has sarin gas. Russia hacked our elections. Russia's doing this, and so forth and so on. And they're struggling and they're thrashing around, and that's why they're panicking. And so they're trying to demonize everybody else for harming their credibility, when in truth is they did it to themselves.
I'll accept that point, so long as you accept my point that we cannot have a president ever dictate who can and who can't ask him questions. And I'll say this, Mike, before I ask you about, I'm going to ask you about transgenderism. Because
before you get to transgenderism, you're missing a point here.
No, I'm not missing it at all.
Every president in history has had the option of deciding who does and does not get into that press room, and every president and every presidential spokesperson gets to decide who they're going to point at to ask a question.
Agreed.
It's never been otherwise.
No, I agree with you, Mike, but they've done interviews with hostile networks and they've taken questions. That's all I'm saying. Listen, I got to ask you this because our time is short. Love the debate, by the way. There's too much agreement in our industry. Too many people agreeing with one another. It's good to have a difference of opinion. Check out Michael's terrific website, whatreallyhappened.com, and listen to his daily broadcasts. They are terrifically presented and produced. Mike, apparently 0.3% of US citizens identify as being transgender. Yet, I'm always mindful when we talk about this. I'm always mindful, not that we should worry too much about offending people, but there are people who do, and they are vulnerable, and they do get upset when these issues are discussed because they feel they're being targeted when they're not. If Trump has done something that I approve of, it's attempting to roll back this legislation that Obama wanted to bring in, where people could choose the bathroom of the of the gender with which they identify.
Claim to identify. There were some sexual assaults.
What's going on, Mike? What's going on, eh?
Okay, well, first of all, there are a couple of overlapping issues. And mental gender, your psychological makeup, is not polarized into pure male or pure female. It has components of both, and the higher your IQ, you tend to have a blend of both male and female traits. Now, your sexual gender is an absolute and is determined by DNA. Now, Bruce Jenner may undergo surgery and hormones to make himself look like a woman, but a DNA test is going to come back showing he is male with the XY chromosome. And let's be honest, Bruce can never have children, which is the whole evolutionary point of sexual gender in the first place. Now, gender identity has become a political rather than a scientific term. Like black versus white or straight versus gay, it's used to divide the population against each other in order to better control them. Now, a lot of people are very confused about their gender growing up. Much of that is societal, beginning with the idea that there's such a thing as a pure male mentality or pure female mentality, so that when a guy starts feeling something that he identifies as being feminine, he starts wondering what's going on with himself, and there's a lot of insecurity. I am very concerned about this practice of high school athletics, which forces children to disrobe and shower only with their own gender at a time when they're just becoming sexually aware. And it's sending the implied message it's okay to be naked and intimate with one's own gender, but not with the opposite. Now, this may be a practical method of dealing with unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases, but if you read biographies of famous gay writers, they often claim that they discovered they were homosexual during this high school period. And so a lot of this seems to be coming more from outside than inside. We've seen in mass media advertising the masculinization of women and the feminization of men, and people tend to go with what they see as fashionable or the new normal. And so a lot of this really is being imposed from outside. People really aren't sure about themselves, and that is rich fodder for the opportunists to come on in and say, well, I'll sort everything out and straighten you out as long as you support my agenda.
What about the idea that what this might be about, and I echo what you said there, by the way, what about the idea that, you know, we're entering the transhumanist phase, Michael? We talk a lot about it on this program. What about the idea that this is, you know, a kind of a prelude to the removal of gender?
Well,
a single gender.
First of all, I like the fact that there's a difference between genders, and so does my wife, for entertainment reasons, as it were.
Recreation.
This idea, this transhumanism, gender-free society, is part of the liberal philosophical underpinnings. And unfortunately, much of modern liberalism is based on a flawed concept, which is that we are all born with completely blank minds, and how we think, how we feel, how we see the world is determined exclusively by the environment around us. So that justifies the liberal political agenda of total control of your environment in order to engineer your mind into whatever the liberals have decided is the ideal. The problem is all of this is based on Margaret Mead's book, Coming of Age in Samoa, in which Mead claimed to have found a culture in which children passed into adulthood without the adolescent traumas that we saw in other societies. Hence, adolescent trauma was a product of the environment and not of our genetics. Unfortunately, the book is a fraud. She makes many, many mistakes in it. The biggest mistake she makes in there is declaring Samoa, when she was there, to be sexually promiscuous, because Hawaii in the same era was as well. But the Samoan culture is strictly monogamous. Their kids go through the same growing up pains that kids everywhere does. What Margaret Mead did is she went down there with an agenda. She didn't go down to actually study what's going on. She met these two Samoan ladies, and she cultivated their friendship, and she started asking them questions. Now, Polynesians as a class love to talk story, and out of politeness, these Samoan ladies told Margaret Mead what Mead obviously wanted to hear. And years later, when the book came on out and all of this questions about whether it was accurate or not were being settled, the government of Samoa actually located these two women and deposed them. And the women just said, she kept saying this is what she wanted to hear, so we told her. And they had no idea she was going to write a book that would become the foundation of the liberal philosophy.
How interesting, Mike. How interesting. Listen, I always love getting your opinion, mate. Thanks for repeatedly coming back on. You are our go-to guy for what's going on in the United States. Folks, go to whatreallyhappened.com. Check out Mike's terrific show. He'll be on air soon. In fact, the way we've moved time, Mike, so we're ending as you're beginning, would you believe?
Okay.
That's not a bad thing, that, is it? It's not bad, that.
No, we stay out of each other's ways.
Stay out of each other's ways, and I don't endorse very much. In fact, I don't endorse anything, but I do recommend your program. Thanks for coming back on. I'm sure we'll talk again next month, and if you ever want to give me some shit on your program, you can do anytime.
Don't you curse on this here radio.
No, I can't be doing that. The FCC will jump all over us. Hey, Mike,
Yes,
have a brilliant rest of your day, mate. Thanks for coming back.
All right, thank you for having me.
Talk soon. Bye. The terrific Mike Rivero, Michael Rivero, whatreallyhappened.com. Check him out now. Loads of comments on this, and the number of comments seem to be in agreement with Michael. Basically, the Trump didn't start it. Look, it's not about who started anything. You have to put aside... And I've had this out with Michael on several programs, and I'm not talking about Michael specifically, but I speak with people on social media who listen to the program. They are American and they don't work in media. They have other jobs and they love Donald Trump. And I do have private conversations with people on social media, not as much as I'd like to because of the nature of the job and putting this on every day, but I do, and I will ask them a couple of clever questions, disarming questions, and more often than not, I find that much of the support for Trump came from the rejection of, as Michael said, the status quo, Hillary Clinton, and the ugliness of the Clintons and who they are and who they really are and all of that. It doesn't matter whether Trump is the greatest president since Kennedy, and he ain't going to be, by the way. You cannot allow ever the leader of any country to start shouting at journalists from organisations, demonising them, calling them fake news, decrying them, mocking them, belittling them and their organisation, and then going on Fox News and doing softball interviews, the like of which Trump did today. Because while Mike was saying, you're missing the point, Richie, and I'm not saying that I wasn't, I might have been missing his point, he's certainly missing the point when it comes to who's going to ask this guy questions. Now, Michael might say, and he did say, well, you don't really expect, Richie, do you, ultimately CNN or any of these organisations? Well, yes, historically, these organisations have not held authority to account. They haven't done. But they are our news organisations. We watch them, therefore they are ours. It's what we have. We decide if it's not good enough or not, and we decide to watch or listen to something else and move on. He doesn't get to do that. It's a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous time. And I repeat, as I said on several programs in the past couple of weeks, ultimately here, it is the media in its entirety that is under attack here. So while you have the narcissism on InfoWars, oh, we're being attacked, we're being demonetized, piss off. Piss off. Trump Nightly News Network. Piss off. You've got hundreds of millions of dollars. You know, sell some more male vitality pills, you'll be okay. They are going after the genuine independent media. InfoWars is now mainstream media. It has been for years. Massive organisation, has a viewership, it has sponsorship on a par with companies like Fox. It completely supports Donald Trump. It is nothing but a mainstream news organisation. Yet I support its right to do whatever it wants and say whatever it wants. But this crap they're putting out, we're under attack. No, mate. Every media institution in the world is under attack. From press regulation and from this sort of nonsense coming out of the Trump Towers and Trump headquarters in the White House. Don't be fooled by it. Don't be fooled by it. Never allow a situation, never entertain a situation where a prime minister, a president, a head of state can say to the national news, You are fake news. You are this. You are a bunch of liars. I'm not talking to you. Can't happen. Shouldn't happen. There's no excuse for it. And those who are cheering him on while he's doing it, because of, understandably their frustration with the crap served up by the MSM for years, are missing the point. Because ultimately what they want to get at is the very, 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 very small independent alternative media. And the genuine independent media itself, you could put it on the head of a needle. There aren't even a dozen organisations truly independent, doing whatever they want to do without any external pressures. We're one of them. There is no editorial here but that which I choose to do on a daily basis. Nobody has anything to do with it. I listen to nobody. I take direction from nobody. When I want advice, I ask for it, but nobody says to me, you have to interview this person, or you have to interview that person, or you must talk about this, or mention this product while you're at it, or do that, Richie. Nobody. So whether you agree with me or not, and I expect you should disagree with me quite a bit, or some of the time anyway, everything that's broadcast here is my idea. And there's about a dozen organisations like that of any worth in the world who will talk about anything. No subject is taboo. We'll go anywhere the information takes us. And that's what this whole attack on the media is really about, is to get to the real independent media.